proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. In 3 weeks, the lives of Logan McQueary and Gabriel Johnson were forever altered by the obsession of defendant Tammi Smith and the selfishness of Elizabeth Johnson. This case is about the quest to eliminate Logan McQueary from the life of his child, Gabriel Johnson, at the hands of a woman intent on adopting a child at any costs, and the hands of a woman scorned. A combination that resulted in the complete disregard for a father's right to raise his child, the complete disregard for the right of a child to be raised by his father, and complete disregard for the law. A combination that resulted in disaster. This is Logan McQueary with his girlfriend at the time, Elizabeth Johnson, and his son, Gabriel Johnson. Logan and Elizabeth had known each other from middle school and began a romantic relationship in the year 2007. Their relationship was not perfect. In fact, it was quite tumultuous at times. But they were intent on making it work, especially when Elizabeth Johnson found out that she was pregnant. And Logan McQueary worked hard at making this relationship work, despite the difficulties that he encountered with Elizabeth. Both before and after the birth of their son, Gabriel, on May 3rd, 2009. However, there became a point when it became clear that the relationship was on a decline. And that began in early June of 2009. In early June of 2009, Elizabeth Johnson got upset with with Logan for several reasons. And in response, she made a rash decision to fly to the city of Boston and visit her grandmother. And she took Gabriel with her. At first, Logan didn't know where she was, but after a few days, it became apparent that that's where she had gone. And after things had settled down, she called Logan and she said, "I want to come back to the state of Arizona." So they borrowed money from her grandfather, and she flew back to Arizona. And it was during that fateful trip that the defendant, Tammi Smith, met Elizabeth Johnson and her child, Gabriel Johnson, for the first time. On a layover from her trip back to Boston, Elizabeth had a few hours in an airport. The defendant noticed her, approached her, and began a conversation with her. During this conversation, the topic of adoption came up, and Elizabeth offered to adopt Gabriel Johnson on that very day that she had just met her. And Elizabeth gave her some indication that that could happen. So the defendant gave her phone number in hopes that she would get a call one day from Elizabeth and get that baby. However, despite the conversation at the airport between the months of June and December of 2009, Elizabeth didn't call. And this upset Tammi. The defendant was depressed and in fact stated that she cried for several months when Elizabeth Johnson did not call her and discuss the idea of adoption. However, the evidence in this case will show that the defendant continued her quest for a child. She already had one adopted daughter, and she wanted another child to add to the family. You will hear evidence that she solicited another adoption from a couple by the name of Jacob Roberts and Rachel Hoover, after she met Rachel standing in line at a Jack in the Box. In the background during this time, between June and December 2009, the relationship between Logan and Elizabeth deteriorated. And it was on December 8th, 2009 that relationship finally ended. Elizabeth had engaged in some violent behavior. Logan had enough, and he left. And he took Gabriel with him to his grandmother's house. Within a few hours, however, he was contacted by the police department because Elizabeth had reported that they were missing. He explained the situation to the officers. He immediately returned Gabriel to his mother, and he left that situation and went to his father's. And ladies and gentlemen, December 8th, 2009 was the last day that Logan McQueary ever saw his son Gabriel. Because on the very next day, Logan was made aware of the fact that Elizabeth wanted to adopt out Gabriel. For the very first time, he heard from her when she demanded that he sign adoption papers and give up Gabriel for adoption, and he refused. He said that's not going to happen. However, what Logan didn't know is that she had already given Gabriel to the Smiths, Tammi Smith and her husband Jack Smith. She had already signed a temporary guardianship paper, giving them legal authority over the child that very day. Later that day, she went to his place of work. And because of the behavior that she exhibited at his place of work, his boss called the police because she was creating such a disturbance. The police arrived at around 6:41 p.m. due to a call for this disturbance. By 6:45 p.m., Elizabeth reports that Gabriel had been kidnapped by Logan, despite the fact that she knew exactly where Gabriel was, with the Smiths she had given to them earlier. Gabriel, after several hours of questioning, after several hours of investigation as to where this child was finally found at the Smiths. And the Smiths did provide the police with a copy of the document that Elizabeth had executed earlier that day. In the meantime, Logan is left without knowing where his child is. He was told that his child was found and was safe, but he had no idea who these people were. He had never met Tammi Smith, never met Jack Smith, never even heard their names. On December 13th, 2009, he still has not seen his child. He lets Elizabeth know that he wants to take care of Gabriel, that he wants to parent that child, that he does not want to give that child up for adoption. In fact, he posts a posting on her MySpace page indicating these sentiments exactly. On December 14th, 2009, he goes to the Maricopa County Superior Court, and he filed for custody of his child. And this is when the legal system got involved. This is also the date when Tammi Smith, the defendant in this case, concocted a plan. She concocted a plan to challenge the paternity of Logan McQueary. And how she first tried to carry out this plan is by soliciting her best friend, Deanne. She asked her friend Deanne if she could use Deanne's husband's name to put on the court document as the purported father of Gabriel Johnson. Her friend Diane, however, quickly put an end to that plan and refused to participate in any such falsification. So what did Tammi Smith do then? She placed the name of a man. She placed on that document the name of a man, Craig Cherry. Craig Cherry is Tammi Smith's cousin. Craig Cherry has never met Elizabeth Johnson. Craig Cherry was not aware of this falsification. Craig Cherry was not the father of Gabriel Johnson. However, she placed his name on that document in order to thwart the process of Logan McQueary trying to get custody of his child. Logan McQueary, on the next date, pleads with Elizabeth again, please let me take care of my son. December 17th, 2009, 3 days after he filed for custody of his child, Judge McVeigh of the Maricopa County Superior Court rules on the paternity, and Elizabeth Johnson agrees that Logan McQueary is in fact the father of the child, and they enact a joint custody at that time, and set up visitation. The judge orders that Logan McQueary is to have Gabriel from Sundays through Wednesdays, and Elizabeth will have him the rest of the week. On this date, however, Gabriel was still in the custody of the Smiths pursuant to the guardianship that she had granted them on December 9th. Now we have Friday, December 18th, a very crucial day in this case. This is 2 days before Logan is to get his first time with his son under the newly enacted court schedule. He was supposed to get him on Sunday, December 20th. On this date, Elizabeth contacts the Smiths and says, I need to get Gabriel back because I have to give him to his father on Sunday. So the Smiths meet her at a church parking lot in the city of Scottsdale and hand Gabriel over to Elizabeth. However, instead of providing the child for the visitation that weekend, Elizabeth leaves town with 7-month-old Gabriel. Sunday, December 17th comes around. December 20th comes around, and the child is not presented. Logan does not see Gabriel. Logan doesn't know where he is. Logan doesn't know where Elizabeth is. He spends the next few days trying to find out where she and his child are. He contacts the police department. They go to her house, and there's nothing there. There's no one there. On December 21st, that Monday, Logan goes back to the Maricopa County Superior Court, and he files an emergency order for full custody of Gabriel. The judge grants it temporarily and sets a hearing for later that week on December 28th, and Elizabeth is expected to appear at that time. He still has no contact with Elizabeth. He then receives communications from the defendant, Tammi Smith, through text messages on December 22nd, 2009. He still hasn't spoken with Elizabeth, but it's clear that the defendant has. She texts him, can we get together tomorrow morning to talk with you and your dad? I'm afraid she'll be gone forever because she doesn't want to go to jail for kidnapping. A few minutes later, she doesn't trust you or your dad. The only way she'll come back is if my attorney faxes the signed papers to her so she will not get in trouble and Gabriel be with us. Defendant wants to meet, wants Logan to sign adoption papers so that Elizabeth will come back. A few more phone calls happen that day. Logan is frustrated and he tells them not to call him again. 4 days later, however, Logan is finally given a number to contact Elizabeth by the Smiths. What's interesting about that, however, ladies and gentlemen, is that the evidence in this trial will show you that the defendant had contact information, had a phone number of a 210 area code, which is a San Antonio area code, as early as December 22nd, 4 days prior to this. When Logan gets that number that day, he immediately starts to contact Elizabeth, tries to find out where she is and where the baby is. That very next day, though, Logan hears something that will change his world forever. He hears from Elizabeth Johnson through a text message, I killed him. A few minutes later, he hears again from her. Elizabeth stated that she killed Gabriel, placed him in a paper bag, and put the paper bag in a dumpster. Shocked and saddened and distraught over what he hears, he calls her. He engages in phone conversations with her that he recorded. And she tells him what she did with that baby. She tells him that she killed his son Gabriel. With this information, Logan McQueary contacts the police. And a nationwide investigation is then begun into the disappearance of Gabriel Johnson. Ladies and gentlemen, and during that investigation, you will see that the defendant put herself right in the middle of it. It was very soon after Detective Ramirez of the Tempe Police Department got involved in the investigation that she realized that the defendant had something to do with this. During this trial, you will hear a lot of evidence, you will hear a lot of testimony from many witnesses. You're going to hear from family members, you will hear from police officers that were involved in the investigation of this matter. You will hear from court personnel. You will hear from Maricopa County Superior Court Judge. And you will hear from the couple that Tammi tried to adopt the baby from prior to Gabriel Johnson. And when you see and hear the evidence that will be presented, when you see the text messages, when you hear the recordings, when you see the court documents, when you put that all together, and there's a calendar in your juror notebooks to help you during this process, you will see that there was a clear plan on the part of the defendant in this case. The evidence in this case will show that it was the defendant's plan to pressure Logan McQueary into giving up his rights to his child. And how do we know this? We know this by the defendant's words, we know this by her actions, and we know this by her deceptions. You will hear that she admitted to the police that she had a plan with Elizabeth. That the initial plan was to get a lawyer, force Logan to be responsible for child support, force him to be responsible for visitation. And their plan was that any time he didn't comply with that, they were going to call the police and have him arrested, in the hopes that he would eventually get sick of it one day, throw his hands up in the air, and sign over his rights to Gabriel Johnson. You will also hear that there was another plan. That the defendant knew that on the date of December 18th, once Elizabeth left the state with Gabriel, that it was Elizabeth's intention to leave the state with the purpose of forcing Logan McQueary to sign over his rights to that baby. And you will see the acts that that woman over there took to get that baby in her hands. You will hear about the text messages, the phone conversations. You will hear about her researching, changing court jurisdictions out of state so that Elizabeth could go to another state and ask another judge to change custody regarding Gabriel Johnson. You will hear specifically about the state of Tennessee. You will see her texts where she tries to get the child from Logan herself. You already saw it earlier. She even went as far as to suggest to the police department that fake adoption paperwork be signed and faxed to a different state. And then she went in even a step further. And she called Judge McVeigh of the Maricopa County Superior Court and left a voicemail message with her scheme. And she clearly told the judge, I want to get that baby. She wanted the judge to sign an order so that she could have that baby. To this day, ladies and gentlemen, Gabriel Johnson's whereabouts are not known. But what the evidence in this case will show is that to the defendant, Gabriel Johnson was a thing to be desired, a prize, an object. She wanted a baby, and she was going to go to any lengths to get one. And you will hear that for for Elizabeth Johnson, Gabriel Johnson was a pawn, a piece in a game, a way to get back at Logan McQueary for ending their relationship. And in their quest to fulfill their individual desires, they joined together, and crimes were committed. Crimes that altered the lives of Gabriel Johnson and Logan McQueary forever. And the state will ask that after you hear all the evidence in this case, after you see the witnesses testify, after you see the documents, hear the recordings, that you use your common sense. and you find the defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit custodial interference and forgery. Because at the end of this trial, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that that is the only verdict that the facts support and the only verdict that justice demands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Romano. Ms. Phillips, on behalf of the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. Where is baby Gabriel? Everybody has been asking that question for about the last 2.5 years. We don't have the answer to that. And unfortunately, we won't have the answer to that by the end of this trial. Because this trial is not really about baby Gabriel at all. This trial is about the character assassination of my client, Tammi Smith. Tammi Smith, who is a solid member of our community, a small businesswoman, a woman raising children, a wife, a mother. That's who Tammi Smith is, and that's who you're going to hear about over the next couple of weeks. You will hear about the relentless attacks on Tammy's character by the Tempe Police Department, by the FBI, by the Scottsdale Police Department. And how did that start? How does a person like Tammi, a law-abiding citizen, raising her family, running her business, how does that happen? She got involved with Elizabeth Johnson. She met Elizabeth, as you've heard, in an airport in Indianapolis. They had a long layover. Tammi was coming back from a business conference. Tammi, being a mother herself, saw this young woman with a child who looked to be about a month old, and she noticed that Elizabeth looked depressed, sad, looked like maybe she needed a little help with the baby. So Tammi approached Elizabeth and offered to hold Gabriel. They conversed, and because they had a couple of hours of layover, they did talk. They talked quite a bit about personal information. They exchanged personal information. Tammi mentioned that she was looking for a child to adopt. Tammi and her husband, Jack, already had adopted Jack's granddaughter, and you'll hear quite a bit more about this. Jack is a bit older than Tammi, and Jack and Tammi decided to adopt Jack's granddaughter because Jack's daughter has trouble and was not able to raise her. So Tammi and Jack decided, because they were older parents, they wanted a younger sibling for the child that they had. So it wasn't about obsession about having a baby. The purpose was to adopt a sibling for young Hannah. They got on the plane to head back to Phoenix, Elizabeth coming from her grandmother's and Tammi coming from her business conference, and Tammi held Gabriel on the plane. When they got to Phoenix, Tammi said to Elizabeth, "Here's my phone number. Call me if you want to, and if you want to talk more about adoption." Tammi did not hear from Elizabeth for 6 months, not a word. Now, instead of sitting around being depressed and crying like the state will have you believe, Tammi tried to adopt other children. She had an adoption attorney, and other efforts were made by her and Jack to find another child for them to adopt as a sibling for young Hannah. And you'll hear about some of those attempts. So instead of pining away for Gabriel, as the state would have you believe, Tammi went on with her life and tried to find another child to adopt. All of those attempts failed. And lo and behold, on December 8, 2009, Elizabeth reappears in her life and decides, because Elizabeth apparently is mad at Logan, she's ready, Elizabeth is ready to bring Gabriel to Tammi. She knows that Tammi and Jack earn a good living, have a nice home, and would provide a nice home for Gabriel, because Elizabeth was pretty confident that she and Logan weren't going to be able to do it. So when Elizabeth brought Gabriel to Tammi, they did execute a power of attorney, not a power of attorney, but a temporary guardianship form. And you'll see that document because Tammi wanted to make sure that if they needed to, they could demonstrate that they had guardianship legally of the baby. Tammi had Gabriel for 10 days, from December 8th through December 18th. During that time, as you've heard, Logan filed papers with the court. At this point, Gabriel's about 7 months old. Logan files documents with the court asking that his paternity be established and that his visitation and custody rights be established. And Judge McVeigh grants that order. In the meantime, before the order is granted, Elizabeth filed a response to Logan's documents. And that's typical in court cases. Somebody files a petition, the other side can file a response. This is the document that Tammi helped Elizabeth fill out. Elizabeth had told Tammi that she was afraid of Logan. And she had reason to be afraid of Logan. And you will hear much more about that, probably this afternoon. Not only that, but Elizabeth told Tammi she wasn't sure that Logan was the father of Gabriel. But she was afraid to put the real potential father's name down on the response because she was afraid that Logan would become violent with that person. It was a person that Logan knew, and that person also was married. So Tammi helped Elizabeth put a different name down on that document, the purpose of which was to force Logan to take a DNA test to prove that he was the father of Gabriel. And as it turns out, during the hearing with Judge McVeigh, Elizabeth agreed, or stipulated, we call in the legal world, agreed that Logan was the father. So the order was entered, and no one had to take a DNA test. Logan's rights were established. That was on December 17th. On December 18th, Elizabeth came to meet the Smiths in parking lot to exchange the baby. Elizabeth borrowed her grandfather's car to do this. She came and got the baby from the Smiths. Tammi assumed that she was taking the baby to Logan so that he could start his court-ordered visitation. Instead, unbeknownst to everyone around her, Elizabeth decided to go to Texas. And yes, Tammi communicated with Elizabeth many times when she was in Texas. And you will hear all about Tammi's phone records and Tammi's text messages and the MySpace page postings. You'll hear many, many details about that. And you will see that Tammi was just trying to help Elizabeth and Gabriel. The way she was trying to help them is she was trying to negotiate a way for Elizabeth to come back and bring the baby back safely. That's all she was trying to do. Instead of being able to help Gabriel find his way home, Tammi got her phones wiretapped by the government, a search warrant executed on her house late at night, and this was after she had already allowed the police to come in without a warrant, which she didn't have to do. The government has subpoenaed her property records, her bank records, her computer records. All of these were subpoenaed or obtained by the police. It was a complete invasion of her life. She cooperated with the police. She did several interviews with Detective Ramirez, many by phone, all of them recorded by Detective Ramirez, unbeknownst to Tammi. Tammi thought, and you may have also heard, and there may be evidence, that Tammi did several television interviews also. Tammi was trying to find Gabriel. Tammi was trying to keep the word out so that someone would bring Gabriel home. That was the purpose of those interviews. Instead of bringing Gabriel home, she got an overreaching police department and government that was gathering evidence to prosecute her. Now, remember during jury selection, and just now Judge Kramer advised you that a defendant does not have to testify. But in this case, you're going to hear from Tammi Smith, because Tammi wants you to know what happened. She has a constitutional right to not sit up there, but she's going to do it because she wants to look you in the eye, and she knows you have questions, and she wants to answer those questions directly. And you will be able to answer or ask her questions. As Judge Kramer has indicated, you'll be able to write down questions. So if you have any questions at all of Tammi or any other witness for that matter, please don't hesitate. We want to answer all of your questions. The law presumes that a person is innocent. We talked about that during jury selection. A defendant never needs to prove anything. We are confident that at the end of this case, you will find not only that there is not enough evidence to convict Tammi, but that she did nothing wrong. All she wanted was to bring Gabriel home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. And Ms. Andrews, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Logan, would you please introduce yourself?
Logan Scott McQueary,
Logan, how old are you?
27.
And let me interrupt you for 1 second just to make sure with the microphones. I'm going to ask you to slide up just a little bit, if you would. That chair's hard to maneuver. And you've got a soft voice like some other people. So project as best you can, so
Okay.
make sure the jury can hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Andrews.
Thank you, Your Honor. Logan, how old are you?
27.
Will you tell us a little bit about your family? Why don't you start with your siblings?
I have a younger sister. She's 23. A younger brother that's 24. I'm 27, and I have an older sister that is 28, almost 29.
And who's your dad?
Frank McQueary.
What does your dad do for a living?
He just retired from being a Phoenix police officer. He's now in the reserves.
For the Phoenix Police Department?
Yes.
And you have some aunts and uncles?
Yes, several.
Tell us about the aunts and uncles on your dad's side.
I have my Aunt Kelly and Uncle Will, and they have 4 kids. And then his other brother, Wayne, and then his wife, my Aunt Jerry, and they have 2 kids, too.
And how about on your mom's side?
I have my Aunt Kathy and Uncle Mike, and I have my Aunt Lori and Uncle Mike, and they have 3 kids. And then I also have my Aunt Sandy and my Uncle Joe, and they have 2 kids.
Logan, are you nervous?
A little bit. I'm just getting over being sick, too.
I'm going to ask you to slow down just a little bit, okay?
Okay.
Tell us about your mom.
Carol McQuarrie. She passed away 4 years ago, April, just this last week, actually.
You talked a lot about your family members. Are you close to your family?
Yes.
You mentioned some nieces and nephews and cousins. Are you close to them?
Yes. My sister has 2 kids, my oldest sister, and then my youngest sister has 1 son.
Your family members, were any of them living in the state of Arizona in 2009?
Everybody, pretty much, except for a few. So
most of your family was here?
yeah, almost my whole family lives here.
Did you do family events together?
Yes.
Birthday parties?
Yes.
Other family occasions?
Yeah, we had get-togethers, family dinners, playing cards, stuff like that, holidays.
You yourself, you don't live in Arizona now. Is that correct?
No.
So you live out of state?
Yes.
How long have you lived out of state?
Almost 6 months now.
And when you moved out of state, did you move with any family members?
No.
Logan, before we get into the facts of this case, I want to talk to you a little bit about your criminal history, okay?
Okay.
You have a couple of felony convictions,
Yes.
right? Were they from 2004?
Yes.
And are they both for solicitation to commit burglary?
Yes.
And one's a Class 5 felony and one's a Class 6 felony?
Yes.
And were those committed around the same time frame?
It's the same case, yes.
And you actually were convicted of those on July 14th, 2004?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. They actually were committed around July 14th and July 15th, 2004, right?
I believe they were in 2003, and then I got convicted. We finally went to court in 2004.
How old were you back then?
I believe I was 19.
And I actually show the dates of crime as July 14th, 2004 and July 15th, 2004.
Okay.
Do you think that's incorrect?
I guess if that's on the police report, then that is. It's a while ago, so I couldn't recall the exact dates.
And you were convicted on March 23rd, 2005?
For that case, I thought I was convicted in 2004. That's when I started probation.
Well, we show 2005. How old
No.
were you around that time
1920,
period?
when I got put on probation, yes.
1920. Do you have any felony convictions since that time?
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about the circumstances surrounding those burglary charges?
I was in a car, made some bad decisions. My friend and I were drinking, and I was driving a car, and he hopped out, and he went into another car that wasn't ours, and he took stuff out of it and put it in the trunk of the car. And we got, we had gotten pulled over by the police and stuff after getting in a fight with some kids that my friend had started, and the stolen property was in his trunk, and both of us got charged with it.
So you and your friend were together when he took items out of a car.
Yes.
Was there more than one car?
I believe there was 2 cars.
Did you at some point show the police where those cars were located?
Yes, I brought them back to where the cars were. I returned the property.
And those felony convictions, did you enter a plea or go to trial?
Entered a plea of guilty.
And when you talked to the police about those offenses, did you first deny you had anything to do with them?
I don't believe I did.
Did you fess up at some point to the police and tell them that you did do it?
Yeah, right when they came to my house. I brought them back right then.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit more later about the circumstances, but I show on February 18th, 2009, you had a probation violation for those cases.
Yes.
And from what I understand, that was for absconding.
Yes.
And what did you do that caused you to abscond?
I had gotten a job offer in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and Elizabeth and I had moved to Fort Smith, Arkansas.
And so you left the state, didn't tell your probation officer you were leaving?
Yes.
And as a result of absconding, what happened to you?
When I came back, I got arrested and charged with probation violation.
And what was the consequence?
They said if I do 4 months in jail, then I can just be done with probation because I had already basically completed my 4 years.
And did you do the 4 months in jail?
Yes.
And when you did the 4 months in jail, did you spend every hour of the day in jail?
No. I was on work furlough.
And did you have a job at the time?
Yes.
Where were you working?
For an AC company. So it was called Boat Air.
And what kinds of hours did you work for the company?
It was all kind of weird hours. That's why I got extended time out. Usually you're only allowed out for 8 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours, and I was allowed out 12 hours a day. Because we worked, if we were on a call and it went late or something, we couldn't just leave somebody without air conditioning. So we had to kind of stay there later till we got the job done. So I was out 12 hours a day and then back in jail for 12 hours.
Now, today is Tuesday, April 17th. Yesterday, did you plead guilty to an offense?
Yes.
And was that to a misdemeanor theft?
Yes.
With a date of crime of October 31st, 2011?
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about the circumstances of that offense?
My buddy had, one of my longtime friends, had taken my mountain bike, and we found out that he went and sold it at a pawn shop. So I went to his house and took his Wii, and I told him that he would get it back when I got my mountain bike back. And I was moving, so I didn't need it. I just went and sold it. And I had just found out about 2 weeks ago that I had a warrant for my arrest.
And look, I'm going to ask you to speak up just a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay. You said that you sold it. Where did you sell the Wii?
At a pawn shop.
Okay. And when you went to pawn the item, did you use false identification?
No.
Did you give him your driver's license?
Yes.
And your driver's license had your name and information on it?
Yes.
Had you pawned things at that place before?
A few years back, yes.
And so they had dealings with you before?
Yes.
Did you pretend at all you were somebody else?
No.
You indicated that you learned about a couple of weeks ago that you had a warrant for your arrest. Did you know that these charges were pending prior to then?
No. I had no clue.
How did you learn about the warrant?
The court appointed me attorney, and my attorney left a message on my phone when I was at work. I called him back, and he explained it to me.
And so you indicated you had a warrant for your arrest. Do you know what offense the warrant was for?
He told me it was for trafficking stolen property.
And your direct complaint indicates that an attorney from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office named Janice Sorensen filed that direct complaint. Do you know Janice Sorensen?
No.
Now, you indicated that you didn't need the weed because you were moving. Is
Yeah.
that when you moved out of state?
Yeah.
When did you move out of state?
I believe it was November either 11th or 12th, the day I left. I got on a plane and flew to Kentucky.
2011?
Yes.
And did you move out of state because of the pending investigation about the weed?
No.
Did you know about the pending investigation about the weed?
No.
Did you know that the police department was trying to contact you about something?
Not until after I had left.
But you learned at some point the police department was trying to reach you?
Yes.
How'd you learn that?
Because they came to my friend's house, and they had called me and told me that the cops had come there, and they were asking to speak to me.
And when you found out the police were trying to reach you, what did you do?
I called the Scottsdale Police Department.
And did you call a specific officer or detective?
It's just the non-information number that I got.
Did you know who it was who was looking for you?
No.
Did you ever hear back from the Scottsdale Police Department?
No.
When you moved to Kentucky, were you in contact with myself and my co-counsel about this case?
Yes.
Did you tell either one of us that you were moving to Kentucky?
Yes.
Did you provide us with an address?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did we have your phone number?
Yes.
And is it the same phone number we've had for you?
Yes.
Is that a cell phone or a landline?
Cell phone.
Had you been in contact with me prior to your learning there was a warrant?
Yes.
Were you prepared to talk to us and come out?
Yes. No, it wasn't a no. It was a yes.
Were you prepared to come out and testify in this case?
Yes.
When you pled yesterday to an offense, what did you plead to?
Guilty.
What type of offense did you plead to?
To trafficking stolen property.
Did you plead to trafficking or to theft?
Objection, Your Honor. Pleading.
Overruled. Can you answer the question?
I believe it was trafficking stolen property.
As I'm looking for the document to show you, let me ask you this. Did you ever read the police report in the case involving your charge?
No. Only my lawyer did.
And you know what, Logan, I don't have a copy of that because I actually gave it to the court yesterday of your plea agreement, but we'll clear that up a little bit later, okay? I actually may ask the court to take judicial notice, if he can, about what the charge was.
Be more comfortable if we have the report itself? Or, I'm sorry, you're asking about the plea agreement? You said police
The
report.
plea
You're talking about the plea
agreement. Yes,
agreement? No, first that. See if I have it here. I may have a copy of it still. If I do, you're welcome to use it. I may not still have it here. Hang on.
Was the judge is looking for that, Logan? Let me ask you, what type of offense did you plead to?
Class 1 misdemeanor.
And what are your consequences?
I got 1 year unsupervised probation.
Was there any agreement in your plea agreement that if you pled guilty, you would get a reduced plea so that you could testify here?
No.
Were you planning on testifying here anyway?
Yes.
Why did you want to be here to testify in this case?
Because I was always planning on being here. I believe Tammi Smith had a lot to do with one of the main reasons that my son is still missing today.
Objection. Move to strike.
Overruled.
Now, I asked you if you ever read the police report involving the offense that you pled guilty to yesterday, and I'm sorry, what was your answer?
I never read the police report.
Okay. Did your attorney ever provide you a copy?
No.
Now, I provided you a copy yesterday. Did you read it yesterday?
I didn't even have a chance. I've been sick, and I pretty much went to bed all last night.
So you have no idea what the allegations were in the report,
No.
but you pled guilty anyway.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Because I just wanted to get it over and done with. Get it behind me.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I didn't hear the last part of the...
Get it behind me.
Okay, thank you.
And Logan, these are nice brand new courtrooms, but the acoustics are terrible.
Sorry.
And I myself am very soft-spoken as well, but you and I need to both work on speaking up in here, okay?
And that microphone, not the one with the red light right in front of you, that's the bar. Slide that towards you a little bit if you could. There you go. That might help a little bit.
Sorry.
And project as best you can.
Okay.
So one more question about the offense from yesterday. Had you been aware that you had a warrant for your arrest, what would you have done?
I would have called the police department and told them. I would have called you guys and, talked to you guys about it, or I would have done something about it. I wouldn't have just let it go.
And in fact, were you arrested and brought here to plead yesterday?
No.
What got you to get here yesterday? How did you get here?
I just flew in from Kentucky.
And just to be clear, did the Maricopa County Attorney's Office make those arrangements for your flight?
Yes.
And prior to you finding out there was a warrant for your arrest and there was an attorney, had we discussed making flight arrangements for you?
Yes, you did.
All right, let's talk about Elizabeth Johnson. When did you first meet Elizabeth Johnson?
First time I ever met her was back in middle school.
How did you meet her in middle school?
I met her and her brother because they lived right around the corner from me. Basically, how do I explain this? Our house was in the middle of the street, and they were just kind of right around the corner. So they walked down our street every day when they came home from school, and they were in my little brother's grade, one grade behind me.
Both of them?
Yes.
What is Elizabeth's brother's name?
Robert.
And they're the same age?
Yes, they're twins.
And did you become friends with Elizabeth or Robert?
Robert, yes. And I knew, kind of just seeing Elizabeth every once in a while through Robert, hanging out with him.
And what types of things did you and Robert do?
Just, I don't know, hang out, do things that kids do, play video games, stuff like that.
When you saw Elizabeth when you were in middle school, what types of things did you and Elizabeth do?
Elizabeth and I never really had much contact when we were in middle school at all.
When did you and Elizabeth start having more contact?
That wasn't until, I believe it was 2007. Robert had just gotten out of jail and he needed a place to stay, and so I let him move into the house that I had lived in because I had just broken up with a prior girlfriend, and she moved back in with her father, and I had an open room in my house, so he moved in there, and she just moved back from Boston, and she started coming around seeing her brother.
When you say she just moved back from Boston, who are you talking about?
Elizabeth Johnson.
And so you met Elizabeth when Robert was your roommate?
Yes.
And at some point in time, did your relationship with Elizabeth become romantic?
Yes. Robert had actually hooked us up on a date.
And so about what time frame was it that you and Elizabeth started dating?
I believe we started dating around, I think it was March of 2007, I believe.
What was your relationship like?
Ups and downs pretty much the whole time. It was good at times and it was bad at times.
What types of things were bad?
Her temper. She'd get pissed off about things just small things really, that didn't really need to be blown out of proportion. And when she'd get pissed off, she would just kind of fly off the handle. So,
At some point in time, did you discover that Elizabeth was pregnant?
yes.
And about when was that?
It was right before we moved to Kentucky.
To Kentucky?
Or not Kentucky, sorry. Fort Smith, Arkansas. It was probably just a few weeks before we moved there. I want to say... wish I had a calendar.
We don't need to be exact.
Okay.
Just approximately when
Let's see.
or how far along was Elizabeth when you found out she was pregnant?
Probably about 3-4 weeks. I remember because the day before, or the day actually that we left for Fort Smith, Arkansas, we started driving. That was the first morning she ever had car sickness, or morning sickness, and we had to pull over about every hour or two, and she threw up.
So had you planned to go to Arkansas before or after you found out she was pregnant?
I got the job after, so that was about the same time we found out that she was pregnant. So we had just decided to pick up and move and kind of start over and start a new life together.
How did Elizabeth feel about being pregnant? Or let me rephrase that. I don't want you to assume what she felt. What did she tell you about how she felt about being pregnant?
She didn't want it. She didn't want Gabriel at all. She didn't want to be pregnant at all. She wanted an abortion. That was the first words out of her mouth.
And how did you feel about that?
I didn't want that, but I told her, ultimately it was her decision.
And so at some point in time you went to Arkansas.
Yes.
Did she change her mind in Arkansas about whether or not she was going to have the baby?
No, it was before we went to Arkansas.
Did she change her mind before you went to Arkansas then?
Yes.
And tell us how that happened.
We had broken up because we had another kind of altercation, and I moved out of the house that we were living in Scottsdale and moved back in with my dad, and then she called me and told me that she was pregnant, and then we talked a little bit, and that's when she said that she didn't want Gabriel, or she didn't want to have a baby and stuff like that, and I said, okay, if you want abortion, that's up to you. And so she said she was going to get one. And we didn't talk for probably about a week after that. She called me back and she said that she's going to keep the baby. And then that's when we started talking more. And then I told her that I got the job opportunity in Arkansas. And so we packed up. I went back to the house, took all my stuff out of my dad's house that I'd moved there, and went back to the house. We packed up and we left.
How long were you in Arkansas?
Probably about 3 or 4 months, and then we came back I think it was the day before Thanksgiving.
And why did you come back from Arkansas?
Because Elizabeth wanted to come back and be closer to her brother and her grandfather, so we picked up and left in one day.
Did either of you have any family in Arkansas?
No.
So you came back around November of 2007? Is that right?
I believe so. I'm trying to get my dates right.
Or would that have been November 2008?
I believe it was November 2008. Yeah.
And when you moved back from Arkansas, did you find a job here in Arizona?
Yes.
What were you doing in Arizona?
At that time, we came back. I didn't have a job for probably, because all of December and all of, I believe, January 2, I was helping my dad. He was selling his house, and they were fixing it up, so he was paying me to fix up his house because I pretty much do all handyman, work and all trades. So I was helping him do that, and he was paying me for it. And then I got arrested in February. I believe it was the 27th of February, and that's when I started working for the AC company.
And, since we were talking about work, I didn't ask you before, so I'll go a little bit backwards. Are you working now?
Yes.
What do you do now?
I work at Quick Stop.
And what do you do for Quick Stop?
Change oil, balance and rotate tires.
Is that the only job you've had out of state?
No, that's not the only job I've had out of state.
What other jobs have you had while you've been in Kentucky?
Worked as a landscaping company. I ran a crew of 3 people. I was a crew leader.
And obviously you're here today. Do you have to at some point get back to Kentucky and get back to work?
Yes, Monday actually.
So you were talking about the work you were doing in Arizona after you moved back from Arkansas, and then you indicated you went to jail. Do you remember approximately when you went to jail?
I think it was actually February 27th when I got arrested.
When was Gabriel born?
Gabriel was born May 3rd.
And what were you doing the day Gabriel was born?
I was in jail.
Were you there the moments that he was born?
Yes.
And how was it that you were there when he was born?
In work furlough, you're only allowed out 6 days a week, and you're only allowed out for 12 hours a day. They induced labor on Friday, and then she stayed in the hospital Friday, Saturday, and I was with her those days, but I had to go back. Sunday was my only day in, and so I was in all day Sunday. And then I got to see Gabriel first thing Monday morning.
And after Gabriel was born, how long were you on work furlough?
For about a half a month, about another 15 or 16 days.
During the time period that you were on work furlough, when did you see Gabriel?
Every day.
How much time did you spend with him?
At least, whenever I could, pretty much. Whenever I could get off work, I'd be at home, and I would be with him.
And how much time are we talking 5 minutes, an hour, 3
More than
hours?
that. It was different every day because my jobs were different every day. Sometimes I'd get to see him for, the whole day, and I'd be off work all day. I could, because we wouldn't have anything, and then some days I could see him only like an hour or two. So it was kind of ups and downs.
And what types of things did you do with Gabriel when you saw him?
Watched him, played with him, fed him. Stuff like that.
Before you had Gabriel, did you have any experience taking care of an infant?
Yes.
What type of experience did you have before Gabriel?
My girlfriend before, Elizabeth, when I started dating her, her child was 6 months old. And we did for almost 4.5 years.
And her child, who was 6 months old, girl or boy?
Girl.
And when you dated the girl who had the child, did you live with her?
Yes, we both lived together.
And how long did you live together?
Almost 4.5 years, a little over 4 years.
And what types of things did you do with your girlfriend's daughter?
Changed her diapers, played with her, fed her, pretty much everything.
Did you ever have occasions to watch her by yourself?
Oh, yeah, she was with me all the time. I would pick her up from daycare, drop her off. We would go and do things. We'd go and do things together, and I'd go and do things just with her, too, if, my girlfriend was at work.
Did you have any other experience with little kids?
Several other ones. I've had, little cousins and friends that have children and stuff like that. I worked at a daycare when I was 16 for a few weeks, on and off.
After you got off work furlough, what types of things did you do with Gabriel?
We mainly, if we didn't go for a walk, if it was nice out, we'd put him in the stroller because he liked, going for walks. I'd put him in the stroller and we'd walk around. If not, then he'd lay down in his room and we'd pretty much just play.
So you played with him?
Yes.
Did you feed him?
Yes.
How often a day did you feed him?
Started off like every 2 to 3 hours. So.
Let me ask you this. How many times a day as opposed to Elizabeth did you feed him? Half the time, 3/4 of the time, 1/4 of the time, only a couple times?
Probably when I was there, most of the time it was just me feeding him.
But you worked?
Yes.
And when you were at work, who took care of Gabriel?
Well, he went into daycare after he was 2 months old, or I believe 2.5 months old.
Why did he go into daycare?
Because Elizabeth didn't want to, she wanted to get out and do things, and she didn't want to stay at home and take care of him.
Who took him to daycare in the mornings?
I did.
Who picked him up?
I did.
And after you picked him up, who took care of him?
I did.
After Gabriel was born, did Gabriel spend time with your family?
As much as I could.
Did anybody in your family ever watch Gabriel for you?
My Aunt Kathy, yes.
And your Aunt Kathy, where did she live?
She lived in Phoenix.
Did any of your other family members ever play with him?
I used to bring him to my grandma's retirement home all the time, and all the people there would just kind of adore him and just kind of pass him around and just play with him and stuff.
We didn't talk about your grandma. Where does she live?
She lives in North Scottsdale now.
And at the time that when Gabriel was little, where did she live?
I don't know if it was Tempe or Mesa.
How was Elizabeth as far as taking care of Gabriel? You already talked about she wanted to do things, so Gabriel went to daycare. Tell us more about that.
She wanted to do things. She wanted to go back to school and be a nurse and stuff, and she started doing that, but then she only went for 2 months. It was like 2 or 3 months, and then she just quit going to school after she got all the loans. She said it was too hard, and she just quit going.
After Gabriel was born, how was your relationship with Elizabeth?
Has had its ups and downs. We had good times, and I think we had more bad times than good times, though.
Was there an incident where you guys had a bad time and Elizabeth left town?
Yes.
When was that?
Gabriel was, I believe he was almost 2 months old.
And what happened?
I was at work, and she called me, and she said, when are you going to be home? And I was supposed to be home about a half an hour prior, and I texted her and told her I was going to be late coming home, and she wanted to go off and do something. She got all mad, and by the time I'd gotten home, she got all pissed off at me and kept calling me over and over again saying, I need to get home, and she said, I'm just going to leave. I'm going to leave Gabriel here, and she just kept yelling at me. I actually called Phoenix Police because she said she was leaving, and Phoenix Police went to the apartment. By the time they got there, this was the first time, actually. She destroyed my whole apartment, cut everything up, all my clothes, everything, cut the tongues out of my shoes, my socks in half, everything. She used a pan to bust the TV in, and she used a knife on the couches and just cut up everything. Pretty much it was all destroyed. And then she left. By the time I got there, the police were gone too. I had to call them back, and they came back, and sorry, I'm nervous. Elizabeth told them that I had done it. When I called the Phoenix PD, they came back, and I said, why would I do this to all my stuff? And he came in and saw all of Elizabeth's stuff still hanging in the closet, and everything of hers not even destroyed at all. And the cop said, because Elizabeth wanted to push charges on me for that, and there was no way that the cop was going to let her, he said, because it was all my stuff destroyed. And so they left, and I left, and I went to my dad's, and I didn't hear from her at all. I kept calling her, and she wouldn't talk to me. I think it was about 2 or 3 days later, she finally called me, and she told me that she was in Boston, and she had flown there to go see her grandmother.
As far as the destruction of your property, was there a prosecution on that case?
I salvaged what I could, and I just left the apartment.
So she called you from Boston. What did she tell you when she was in Boston?
That she was sorry for everything, and she just apologized to me, and she wanted to work things out and come back to Arizona, and it wasn't working out there. Her grandmother and her weren't getting along, and she hates her grandmother and all this stuff. And I didn't have the money to bring her back, so because I had just spent money, I had to get a new apartment. So all my savings, everything I had, went to getting a new apartment. And so we borrowed money from her grandfather, and he loaned us the money to get a plane ticket for her to come back to Arizona.
Why'd you have to get a new apartment?
Because they kicked us out of the apartment because it was destroyed.
So Elizabeth came back.
Yes.
When she came back, did she tell you about meeting anybody at the airport?
No.
Did she talk to you about adopting Gabriel out?
She had talked a little bit about, she didn't say adopting, but she had brought up a conversation a few times, what if we can't take care of him, what if not, while we were laying in bed at night, stuff. We talked a little bit about, what if we can't take care of him. Trying to think of how the conversation went. We just kind of talked back and forth about, if we can't take care of him, then we can talk about it further down the line, about maybe someone else like taking care of him or something like that, or helping us out, and so we can get back on our feet and stuff like that, because we weren't making that much money. I was the only one working. So.
And when you were talking about other people helping you out, who were you thinking about?
I was thinking about my family. So.
And so at that time, had you ever heard about Tammi Smith?
No, she never mentioned her name once.
Was there an incident that occurred in September 9th, 2009, where things weren't going very well between you and Elizabeth?
September 9th. You'll have to refresh my memory.
Was there a time she got mad at you?
She got mad at me a lot.
Okay. Let me be more specific. Did you end up filing an emergency order of protection against her?
That's when she destroyed my second apartment, the one that we actually moved into out of the first one that she destroyed. So.
Tell us what happened.
I was at work and I had no clue about anything that was going on. I was working. My apartment manager called me, said Elizabeth's in the house or in the apartment, busting out all the windows, and I said, "Well, I have no clue what's going on." I hung up with him, tried calling her over and over again. She wouldn't answer, so he called me back and he said, "I have to call the police, I have to call the police." So I said, "Go ahead, I don't know what else to do." And I was probably about an hour away, so I started heading there, and by the time I got there, the cops had Elizabeth in handcuffs and they were putting her in a police car. And we went up and looked at my apartment. Pretty much the same thing happened again. The whole thing was just destroyed, but this time all the windows were broken out and all the mirrors were broken. Tile was broken on the floor. We had a little puppy and he was running around. He had glass all on his paws. The police were really pissed off about that. They were cleaning glass out of his paws. And we didn't know what set her off because I hadn't talked to her all day. And then come to find out, her brother had talked to her earlier, and that's when her brother found out that his girlfriend was pregnant, and his brother, or her brother, her twin brother, Robert Johnson, basically told her that my girlfriend's pregnant, and she said, "Ha, well, you're not fertile. It's probably not yours anyways." And he turned around and said, "Well, ha, Logan's probably cheating on you," kind of get back at her, and that pretty much set her off. So I never got the story out of Elizabeth, but that's what her brother had said happened. Conversation on the phone.
And so what did you do when she was mad at you and destroyed your property?
I just took what I could out of the apartment, and I had my dad go and pick up Gabriel from daycare because I was dealing with the police there. I called the daycare and told them my dad's name, and my dad went and picked him up. And then the next morning we went down and ordered, we filed the motion, what do you call it now? The emergency order of protection.
And was that for you and Gabriel or just for you?
For both of us.
And you indicated you had your dad get Gabriel out of daycare.
Yes.
Where did you and Gabriel go after that?
We went to my dad's house.
And did an incident occur because your dad took Gabriel out of daycare?
Yeah, Elizabeth got out of jail the next day and went to the daycare, probably thinking that I was going to take him to daycare the next day, which I didn't. And she called Scottsdale Police because he wasn't there, and she tried to file a police report with Scottsdale Police saying that my dad kidnapped Gabriel. And Scottsdale Police called both of us and, was trying to find him. They needed to know that he was okay. And it was kind of perfect timing. We just got out of court with the emergency order of protection. So we went straight down there, and the cops served her with the emergency order of protection. And they had to talk with her, too, because for filing a false police report, they just kind of gave her a warning.
And that was based on her saying that your dad kidnapped Gabriel?
Yes. She was trying to file a police report saying that he kidnapped him.
Now, after that, did you and Elizabeth get back together?
We were broken up for probably about a month or two, but yeah.
Why'd you get back together?
I don't know. Dumb love. I don't really know what it was. We just kind of started talking again, and I brought Gabriel to see Elizabeth, and one thing led to another, and we got a place together.
During the time you were apart, where was Gabriel staying?
At my dad's with me.
Did she have visitation with him?
Not that often, no. She barely ever saw him.
Were there any court orders in place at that point saying who could have who?
No, it was just the emergency order of protection, and I dropped that.
Do you remember approximately when you dropped that?
It was a few weeks after. I don't remember the exact date.
Okay. Why don't you tell us what happened on December 8th, 2009?
December 8th, that's when Elizabeth and I broke up again. What happened was I was working for the AC company, and I had a second job working for the 99-cent store. And I had to work a few night shifts because we were trying to get ready for Christmas and everything, so we had to change everything in the store. So I just got off work in the morning, and I got my paycheck, and pretty much all my paychecks I just gave them to her so that I didn't hear any bad things about it, because she would always pretty much just gripe at me to give them to her and where was money going and stuff like that. So every single paycheck she just demanded I give to her, so I did. But this time I went and cashed my paycheck, and I kept out $30, and she was asking me where the $30 was, and I showed her where it was, and I said I wanted to buy some Christmas gifts. I wanted to keep some cash for myself, and she said no, and she was going to take the money, and I said no, you can't have it. And some of the money was missing because I got a Monster and a pack of cigarettes, and she was pissed off that I got a Monster and a pack of cigarettes, and she didn't believe me. She wanted a receipt for it, and that even made her more pissed off because I didn't have a receipt for it. And she told me to get out, and we just kind of argued back and forth, and she said, get out. And so I finally just had enough of it. I got up out of bed, and I was leaving, and she said, take that thing with you. And so I went in Gabriel's room and packed up some of his stuff, and I left with Gabriel.
And where did you go with Gabriel?
First, I didn't know where to go. I think we sat in Walmart parking lot because I had a black SUV at the time, and we just pretty much sat there in the Walmart parking lot probably for about an hour. I didn't know what to do, and I called my dad and talked to him for a little bit, and then I called my grandma and went over to my grandma's, and we stayed there at my grandma's for probably about 4 hours.
And at that point, did you hear from the police?
Yeah. The police called me and told me that if you don't return Gabriel to Elizabeth, then we're going to have to come and find you, and if we do, then you're going to go to jail. And I said, I don't want to go there by myself, so will you meet me there? And so the police officer met me there to return Gabriel.
And did the police advise you of what Elizabeth was accusing that night?
That night?
Did she accuse you of kidnapping him again?
Yes, the next day.
Well, let me be clear.
The 9th.
When you took Gabriel to your grandmother's,
Yes.
Did Elizabeth contact the police about you taking Gabriel?
Yes.
And then you returned Gabriel?
Yes.
So tell us what happened December 9th, 2009.
That night, December 8th, I went back to my dad's, and he said, pretty much, I believe it was the weekend, so he told me just to go to work and stuff, so I went to work the next day, and he said, we'll go and file for full custody, it's enough's enough, and I should probably do something, so I agreed. I wanted to go file for full custody, and so I went back to work the next day, and I believe, I don't even remember what time it was, maybe about an hour or two into work, she started calling my cell phone and calling my work.
When you say she, who do you mean?
Elizabeth Johnson. And she just kept calling and asking for me, and my manager was kind of wondering what was going on, and I explained the situation to him. And when she called, that's the first I had heard. She said, we need to talk because I want to give Gabriel up for adoption. And that's the first I had heard about it at all through our relationship. Besides the beginning when we had first had a conversation about it, all the months in between there, I'd never heard about it. She never spoke about it once.
And what did you tell her in response to her telling you she wanted to give Gabriel up for adoption?
I told her no, that I'm going to file for full custody.
And what happened the rest of that day?
She said, if you don't talk to me right now, then I'm going to come down there and talk to you. And I said, no, you're not. I'm working right now. And I hung up the phone on her. Next thing you know, she came walking in the door of the 99-cent store, pretty much causing a big ruckus, yelling at me, screaming at me in the store. My manager told me to go back to the office. I went back to the office, and she just went back there, and she was banging on the office door trying to get in, and she just kept kicking on it and banging on it. So the manager went and called the police, and Tempe police came down and talked to her, And they took her in the stock room and held her back there and talked to her, and she claimed then that I kidnapped Gabriel the night before I came back to the house on the 8th, and I kidnapped him. And the police came back in and questioned me, saying that Elizabeth saying you kidnapped him, and they were...
I'm sorry to slow down.
Sorry.
You're flying both for a court reporter. It's tough to keep up.
Sorry.
When you start talking, it's easy to talk fast, but you need to slow down and pace yourself as best as you can going forward.
Logan, let me interrupt you here. So Elizabeth came to your work and accused you of kidnapping again, and the Tempe Police Department became involved.
Yes.
During this day, December 9th, 2009, how much time did you spend with the Tempe Police Department?
On the 9th?
Yeah, on that day.
I want to say from like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 11 or midnight, something like that.
And at that time, did you have any idea where Gabriel was?
I had no clue.
How did you feel about...
I'm sorry, I did not hear that answer.
I had no clue.
Thank you.
How did you feel about being accused of kidnapping Gabriel yet again?
I was pretty pissed off about it because it wasn't the first time. Then I was just kind of sick of it, just being accused of it over and over again and having to prove that I didn't kidnap my own son.
Did you advise the Tempe Police Department of the previous occasions she accused you of kidnapping Gabriel?
Yes.
So you spent quite a bit of time with the Tempe Police Department.
They held me in the office with a police officer right there next to me, talking to me, and they wouldn't let me go anywhere until Gabriel was found.
And were they asking you questions about your family members, your friends?
They had me get on my cell phone and give them numbers of my family members and stuff, and they went to all my family members' houses, and they searched every single one of my aunts and uncles' houses. They searched my dad's house, my grandma's house, everybody's house for Gabriel.
At some point in time, did you learn that Gabriel was safe?
Yeah.
When was that?
I think it was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, that next morning.
And who did you learn that Gabriel was safe? Who told you that?
Tempe police officer called me. I don't remember their name right now, but they just said, the only thing we can tell you is that he's safe and we know where he's at, but that's all we can tell you.
He didn't tell you where Gabriel was?
No, he said he couldn't tell me.
He didn't give you the names of anybody who might have had Gabriel?
No.
Did they ever mention the Smiths to you at that point?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Go ahead and answer.
No.
On that same date, did you receive a message from Elizabeth?
On the 9th?
Yes.
I don't recall. We may have talked.
Did she talk to you about adoption that day?
On the 9th? That was the day that she went into my store and said that I need to sign adoption paperwork, so yes.
Okay. Did Elizabeth mention to you who she wanted to give the baby up for adoption?
She never said any names. All she kept saying was, I need to sign adoption paperwork. That's the only thing she said.
After you found out Gabriel was safe, did you have communications with Elizabeth Johnson on MySpace?
I believe we sent a few emails back and forth, yes.
And in those conversations, basically, what did you tell Elizabeth about your feelings on adoption?
That I didn't want him to be adopted at all. I wanted a chance to be able to take care of him myself.
And did you at some point meet with CPS?
Yes.
Why did CPS meet with you?
I called CPS.
And what was the reason you called CPS?
Because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where Gabriel was. I didn't know anything. So I didn't know what to do, really.
And at that point, did you learn about the Smiths?
I believe it was the Smiths, yes. CPS told me the Smiths' name.
Now, we talked about what happened on December 8th when you had your dad, or when you took Gabriel to your grandmother's. Have you seen Gabriel since that day?
That was the last time I ever saw Gabriel.
When you returned him to Elizabeth?
Yeah.
After you talked to CPS, did you hear from or did you get information regarding Tammi Smith and Jack Smith?
I got their names, yes.
After you heard from CPS, what did you do to try and find out about the Smiths?
My father and I started looking up names and stuff on the internet and kind of trying to see who they were and where they lived or a phone number or something, because we knew Gabriel was with them.
Did CPS provide you any contact information for them?
Just their names.
Were you able to locate their information?
I believe it was, I can't remember exactly what day. I don't remember exactly how we found their phone number, but we found their phone number. My dad kept looking, doing people searches and stuff on the internet.
And so at that point in time, did you have conversations with Elizabeth or with Tammi and Jack Smith?
Yes.
And those conversations, did you have telephone conversations, text message conversations? How did you communicate with them?
The first time, I believe, I called a number that, I don't remember exactly how we got the number, but I called it and I said, "Is Tammi Smith there?" And she said, "Yes, this is her." And then we started talking and she said, I believe the first conversation was, Tammi said, "Oh my God, I was trying to look for you guys, look for you and your dad, find a phone number, but I couldn't find a phone number for your dad or you anywhere." And then it pretty much went on, me explaining the situation, everything that Elizabeth's done basically in the past and up until now and everything we were going through. And then she kind of explained everything that Elizabeth explained to her about me, what Elizabeth was saying.
And was this the first time you'd ever talked to Tammi?
Yes, that was the first time.
During this phone call, how did you feel about Tammi?
Felt she was a nice lady.
Did you feel that she was trying to interfere with your rights to Gabriel during this conversation?
Not at first, no.
Did you have other conversations with Tammi Smith?
Yes.
Did you have other conversations with her that day or other days?
I can't recall if we talked later that day or not. We had a few other conversations.
And the other conversations, why don't you tell us about some of the other phone conversations you had with Tammi Smith?
We had talked about, they had talked about Elizabeth being gone. I'm trying to think of, because I believe the first phone conversation was around like, the 21st or the 22nd, something like that. I don't remember the exact date, but of December. And then after that, we had another conversation. Basically, she was telling me that Elizabeth they wanted me to sign court documents or adoption paperwork, and then they wanted them to fax them to Elizabeth, and then they would wait 5 days, and then Gabriel would come back, and they would be with the Smiths. And they kept kind of pushing that. I think we had maybe 2 conversations about that, and I think that was the next one that we had. When they had talked, they said that they had talked to Elizabeth, and then the next one after that was we had talked about because it was, I believe, I talked to Tammi first for about the first few days, and then Jack Smith had got on the phone, and I talked to him after that. I can't remember exactly all that we talked about, but it was kind of conversations like that.
And we went kind of backwards. I think we were originally talking about your conversations with Elizabeth on MySpace and telling her you didn't want the baby to be adopted. So, and it's my fault because I led you there, but let's go back a little bit. You indicated after CPS that you filed for custody. What happened at that point?
After I filed for full custody, let's see, I don't remember the date I did that. We went to court on the 17th, and Elizabeth and I had actually met on the 16th, and we had talked about that the night before we went to court. And we had she wanted to get her life back together and stuff like that, and she said that, she had talked to me again about giving them custody of Gabriel, and I said no, I didn't want to do it. So we had talked about getting both shared custody instead of me, because I filed for full custody, getting full custody, and so we both agreed on that.
Okay, I'm going to stop you here a little bit. Let's clarify a little bit. You said you went to court on the 17th?
Yes,
And that was December 17th?
I believe so.
And did you file paperwork prior to going to court that day?
Yeah, I think it was the 13th or 14th when I filed the full custody paperwork.
And this conversation you're talking about now with Elizabeth, did that happen after you filed paperwork or before you filed paperwork?
After I'd filed paperwork. It happened actually the day before, on the 16th, before we went to court.
Okay. Now tell us what happened in that conversation with Elizabeth.
We had talked about Tammi and Jack, and Elizabeth didn't use any names or anything like that. She just kept saying that she'd have a better life and they're rich and all this stuff, and they offered to give me $1,000 so I can get an apartment or get back on my feet. It would help me out and stuff like that. And we had talked about it a little bit, and then after that, we just pretty much both agreed on. I don't exactly know how the conversation went. We both agreed on having shared custody of Gabriel after talking about that, and she kept saying that she wanted to go back to school and she wanted to get a job and go out and do more stuff. And I said, we both said that if I have him half the time, then I'll give you a chance to do stuff, and you can have him half the time, and that'll give me a chance to do stuff too, and we can try this. If it doesn't work out, then maybe we can decide on something else. But that's what we both said okay to it, and that was pretty much the end of the conversation that night. So.
And that conversation, was that in person?
Yes, it was at our trailer.
And was that an amicable meeting?
An amicable meeting.
Were you guys getting along that night?
Yes.
In fact, you were getting along pretty well.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us?
We actually made out and then had sex later that night. And then I left around probably 1 or 2 in the morning.
So you indicated you went to court the next day.
Yes, then we met at court the next day.
You didn't go to court together?
No.
When you went to court the next day, what was your understanding of what would happen in court that day?
That we were going to have shared custody. Elizabeth was calm and acting calm. She wasn't acting up or anything, getting mad about anything. We both agreed on it.
When you went to court, was it your intention to make allegations about Elizabeth at that time?
It wasn't my intentions, no, but I had already put it, when I went to file full custody, I just told the truth. I put everything that Elizabeth's done, and I put everything that I've done. I fill out the paperwork how it said to fill it out. And so kind of allegations came up in court, and we kind of bickered back and forth a little bit.
How did the allegations come up? Who started the questions about the allegations?
I couldn't say. I'm not exactly sure which side started it.
Did the judge ask you about what you put in your petition?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of what happened in the hearing as far as agreeing or not agreeing to custody?
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, that's not a very good question. I will reword it. During the hearing, did Elizabeth agree that you have any custody over Gabriel?
She agreed that I had custody, I believe it was Sunday through Wednesday, and then she would have him the rest of the week.
Now, were there discussions prior to that about who should have custody?
Was there prior discussions in the court hearing?
In the courtroom.
I don't believe so.
Was there a time during that conversation where you asked for having custody most of the time, and then Elizabeth asked for having custody most of the time?
Oh, yeah, I think that's what we both said at first, and then we both kind of backed off of it. Because the judge said, you guys need to stop being childish about this, and you need to work your problems out.
And originally, who did you suggest have custody of Gabriel on Sundays?
Elizabeth. I said that Elizabeth should get him on Saturdays and Sundays, and I should get him Monday through Fridays.
And why did you think you should have him Monday through Fridays?
Because she said she wanted a chance to work and wanted a chance to go to school, so I was giving her a chance to go off and do whatever she wanted, because that's pretty much what she did when we lived together. She went up when he was at daycare, and she did whatever she wanted, so I didn't think she would want him during the week.
And did Elizabeth ask the judge not to have him on Sundays?
Yes.
And what was the reason for that?
She went to I don't remember exactly what it was called now. It was kind of like a parenting class. They learned about children and babies and stuff like that. And if she would go there, she would get free diapers and her formula and stuff like that.
Was that a class that only happened one time or multiple times?
It was every Sunday, but she wouldn't go every Sunday. She'd just go maybe every third Sunday or something like that.
So later in the conversation with the judge, did you end up getting custody for different days than Monday through Friday?
Yes, I said that was fine. I could take them on Sunday.
And you were supposed to have them then what days?
Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday.
During that meeting with the judge, did the judge give you any information on how you could handle some of the allegations that were going back and forth between you two?
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Did he talk to you about a parenting meeting?
Yes, he talks about both of us going to parenting meetings.
And what was your understanding of the parenting meeting?
Both of us were going to go there and pretty much it was kind of like a therapist. We go there and talk about our problems and work things out.
And did the judge indicate how that information would help the judge?
He never indicated it, no.
So after that, well, let me ask you, was there anybody with you at that hearing on the 17th?
My dad was there, yes.
Was the courtroom somewhat similar to this courtroom?
It was a lot smaller.
Were there tables like this where both parties sat?
Yes.
Did you sit at one of the tables?
Yes.
Where did Elizabeth sit?
At the other table.
Where was your dad sitting?
I believe he was sitting behind us on the benches.
Was there anybody there with Elizabeth?
No, not that I know of. I don't remember anybody else being there.
Did anybody tell you that your dad couldn't be in the courtroom?
No.
Did you ever have any understanding that nobody other than you and Elizabeth could be there?
No.
Did you ever see the Smiths on that day?
No.
If the Smiths have alleged that they were there at the courthouse outside the court and you walked right by them and didn't even look at Gabriel, do you recall that happening?
I don't recall ever seeing them there.
Is it possible they were there and you didn't see them?
Might be possible, but I really never saw him. So I think I would have saw my son if I walked out of the courtroom when he was there.
Were you expecting the Smiths to be there with Gabriel?
Elizabeth had said that they were heading down there, but that was the only thing. The judge told her that they shouldn't come to the courtroom. They shouldn't come to the courthouse.
And did Elizabeth tell you that she was going to show up there with Gabriel at all?
No.
And at that time, did you have any idea what either of the Smiths looked like?
No.
So that court hearing was on the 17th. When was the next day you were supposed to have Gabriel?
That Sunday. I don't remember exactly what day of the week that was. I think it was maybe a Wednesday or Thursday. I think it was a Wednesday. And I was supposed to pick up Gabriel Sunday morning at 8 o'clock.
Would that be Sunday, December 20th?
Yes.
Did the court, this was close to Christmas. Did the court settle who was going to have Gabriel at Christmas time?
I believe Elizabeth was going to have him at Christmas time.
Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, or?
I don't remember exactly. One of us got on Christmas Eve and one of us got on Christmas Day.
You don't remember who had which day?
I think she had on Christmas Day. That's what we agreed on. I said that was fine.
During that hearing, did Elizabeth dispute the fact that you were the father?
When the judge asked her if I was the father, she just said yes, he was. She didn't dispute it.
Did she mention that there was another potential father?
No.
Did she agree that your name is on the birth certificate?
Yes.
And did the judge find that you had paternity?
Yes.
Do you recall the judge talking to Elizabeth about what she needed to do if she wanted to challenge paternity?
I believe he did talk to her about that, yes.
about how he felt about what happened.
He was irritated with me.
He's mad at you?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Because I filed for full custody, and at first when I filed for full custody, I was pretty much gung-ho. I was sick of everything, and I didn't want it to keep happening over and over again. And then Elizabeth and I talked, and we both agreed on shared custody, and I kind of went back on what I said I was going to do.
How did Elizabeth feel about your dad?
She didn't like him at all. She thought he was the devil.
Is there a specific reason she didn't like him?
Not that I know of. He's always been nice to her. They've never had an altercation that I know of at all. She's just always spoke ill of him, like just always put him down.
Is your dad involved in your life?
Yes.
Is he very involved in your life?
Yeah.
You were supposed to pick up Gabriel on that Sunday. Did you hear from Elizabeth between the court hearing and that Sunday?
Yes.
What did you hear from Elizabeth?
The judge told me when we left the hearing that, because I asked him how do we arrange, where we pick him up and where we drop him off, and he said you need to call her and find out, you guys need to make those arrangements. So I called her on Friday, and basically she told me there's no way in hell you're ever seeing Gabriel again, and she hung up the phone on me. And so I called the judge, and I got the judge's assistant, and I told him what happened, what Elizabeth said, and I was like, what if she doesn't let me see him on Sunday and stuff? And he told me that come back into court on Monday morning, and then you can file some other paperwork to enforce the judge's orders, and then we'll go from there. And so I said, okay, and went to pick him up Sunday morning, and he wasn't there.
Let me ask you this. At some point in time, did you start recording your phone calls with Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
At this point in time, had you started recording the phone calls?
No, not that time.
What happened on December 20th, the Sunday that you were supposed to pick up Gabriel?
I believe that was the day I actually started recording stuff. My dad told me that, if Elizabeth does say something, then you need to get it on recording so that you can show proof of it. So when I went to the trailer, I brought the recorder with me.
Did you turn it on?
Yes.
And what happened when you were at the trailer?
I went up, knocked on the door, and nobody answered. Looked in the windows and stuff, and pretty much the drawers and everything were open, and the closet was open, and most everything was gone.
And what did you do after you noticed everything was gone?
I went back and told my dad, and he said, we talked about it, and we'll go to court tomorrow, and we'll go talk to the judge.
And so did you go to court the next day?
Yes.
Did the judge see you?
Yes.
What happened in that hearing?
Actually, I don't think the judge saw me. I believe it was just the assistant that came out, because the judge ruled that I get temporary custody of Gabriel, and he just brought a piece of paper out giving me temporary custody of Gabriel.
And what did you do with that piece of paper?
There's not much you can do with it.
Did you contact the police department?
I believe I did contact the police department that day. The only thing that the judge's assistant told me, the police can't really do much for you. We can't do anything for you. If you find Gabriel, then you can call the police and show them this piece of paper, and you can tell them where Gabriel's at, and they can go get him for you, and then they'll return him to you. But you have to find him on your own. So I went to Tempe Police, and I talked to a police officer there, and pretty much they told me that there's nothing that they can do for me. It was a custody issue. I have to find him on my own.
Now, so then we previously talked about you talking to Tammi and hearing from the Smiths. Was that after you went to court and got that temporary custody order?
I don't know if it was that day or not.
But it was after that day. You got the temporary custody order.
It was after the temporary custody, yes. I didn't talk to them at all before then.
So at first you indicated that you thought that Tammi was a nice lady.
Yes.
What was your impression about what her motives were as far as Gabriel?
Objection calls for speculation.
Can you repeat the question?
Rephrase the question so I can put it in the context of time.
During the first first conversation you had with Tammi on the phone, what was your impression of her motives regarding Gabriel?
The first time I talked to her on the phone, I thought that she was, had good motives, and she was a nice lady and was willing to help. She just wanted, the best for Gabriel.
And at that time you talked to Tammi, were you aware of where Elizabeth had gone?
No, not our first conversation.
Were you aware that Elizabeth had even left the state?
No, I didn't know where she was.
And you had already gone to the trailer and saw that she wasn't there.
Yes.
And specifically, what did you see to know she wasn't at the trailer?
All her stuff was gone. Looking in the windows, all the drawers were open. The closet door was open. Everything was gone out of the whole room.
But at that point, you had no idea where Elizabeth had gone?
No.
Did the Smiths tell you where they thought she had gone on that first telephone call?
No.
Did you have additional phone calls and text messages with the Smiths after that?
Yes.
During those phone calls and text messages, what did your impression of Tammi's motives change?
Yes.
How?
Just over time talking to them, just through conversations that we had. I think it started with Jack Smith. I believe it was a conversation we had, kind of threw me off a little bit. First of all, it was the way that they kept kind of asking about the adoption and saying that if I signed adoption paperwork and send it to Elizabeth, that really irritated me. And they had asked me that a few times. And then another conversation that I had with Jack Smith was he mentioned that it's no way for a child to ever grow up in a trailer park. You got to think about things like that and stuff. And it really irritated me about that too. I got mad and didn't really yell at him, but kind of got in an argument with him, saying that it's not where you live, where a child lives. It's where the parents are and, who raises them. Or how do I rephrase that? I said it's, who the parents are and whoever raises them makes a child who they are, growing up and stuff. It's not exactly where you live, and it doesn't matter if I live in a trailer. And it really set me off, and from then on we just kind of butt heads.
Did you advise Tammi and or Jack how you felt about them adopting Gabriel?
I think I flat out said no, that I didn't want them to adopt him at all. I believe in the conversation I said I want a chance to raise Gabriel on my own.
So at some point in time, Christmas came and went?
Yes.
Is that right? And you still didn't know where Gabriel was?
No.
Did you have any idea where Elizabeth was on Christmas?
No.
At that point, had the Smiths provided you with any information regarding Elizabeth being in San Antonio?
No.
Had they provided you with any phone number?
No.
Had you tried to reach Elizabeth?
There was no way I could. I didn't know where she was.
Did you have a phone number for her?
She didn't have a phone. It got shut off.
Did you then hear from Elizabeth on December 27, 2009?
I believe we had a phone call prior to that.
Okay. Well, tell us about the phone call prior to that.
She had just, we talked on the phone. I believe the conversation, she was saying that I'm saying bad things about her, and that I'm saying that they're going to put out an Amber Alert and there's going to be a warrant for her arrest. And I said, no, I've never said anything like that. I never said it, I never said anything like that to anybody. And I believe that was most of the conversation, just talking about that and her yelling at me. And then that was pretty much the end of the conversation. She hung up on me. And then the 27th, that's when she sent me a text message.
Let's go back to the conversation before the 27th. Time frame. I would imagine you don't remember the exact date, but do you know how soon before the 27th that phone call was? Was it a day or two before that?
I believe it was the 26th.
Okay.
It was either the 26th or no, it wasn't the 27th, because that was the only time it was the 26th. Yeah.
And you indicated Elizabeth was saying that you issued an Amber Alert for her?
She said that she heard that there was going to be an Amber Alert and there's going to be a warrant for her arrest. And I believe we had a conversation like that on the 26th.
And did you ever ask for an Amber Alert for her?
I asked for an Amber Alert for Gabriel, yes. Well, not at that time, no. Not at that time, no.
Before?
That was until later.
Later.
Yeah.
So at the time that she called you, the conversation we just talked about, had you asked for an Amber Alert?
No.
Other than the contacts with police that we've already talked about, did you contact police? Before the 27th?
Before the 27th? Yes, I believe I went to, once I found out who Jack and Tammy were, I went to the Tempe police again, and that's when I was kind of getting fishy about them and kind of thinking they were a little bit weird. And I believe it was after that conversation with Jack when I got mad at him, went back there and said, I believe they're talking to Elizabeth, and I think that they know where she's at, but they're not saying anything. And they were the last people to be seen with Gabriel. So is there any way that you can call them and talk to them at least? And he said, I can't really do anything for you and stuff, but I can at least call them. And the police officer called and he had a conversation with Tammy.
Let's talk about then what happened on December 27th in regard to Elizabeth. What was the first thing you heard from her that day?
I was just leaving my grandmother's house, and she texted me, and she said I killed him. That was a text I got, and I got on my phone and kept calling her over and over again, and she wouldn't answer, and then finally she answered.
When she answered, where were you?
I was driving in my car.
Did you talk to her on the phone?
Yes.
What did she tell you when you talked to her on the phone?
I believe I asked where she was. She said, at one point in the conversation, she said, you know where I'm at, and I guessed where she was at. I said, are you in Arizona? No. Are you in the trailer? No. Are you in Texas? And she said, yeah. And
why did you think she was in Texas?
Because I had gotten her phone number, and we looked at the area code on the computer, and it showed that it was San Antonio, Texas area code.
Where did you get the phone number?
From Tammy and Jack Smith.
And when did you get it from Tammy and Jack?
I believe that was the 26th.
And so you asked her if she was in Texas, and what happened?
She kept saying that, I said, you can't say that about Gabriel, and she said, basically, well, you made me do it. I said, you didn't kill him, and she said, yes, I did. And the conversation kept going back and forth like that. She said, you made me kill him, and I can't remember how it all went.
Well, let me ask you this, Logan. We talked about you having a recorder, and the first time you recorded anything was when you went to the trailer to see if she was there on the 20th. Did you record conversations with Elizabeth after that?
After the 20th?
Yes.
Every conversation I had with her.
Did you record conversations with Tammi Smith after that point?
Every conversation I had with them.
Did you record conversations you had with Jack Smith after that point?
Every single one.
Did you receive text messages from Elizabeth? At any point in time while she was missing?
I don't believe I received any text messages.
Okay, what about on the 27th?
Yes, on the 27th I did.
And did you save that text message?
Yes.
Did you receive text messages from Tammi Smith during this whole time period?
Yes.
And did you receive text messages from Jack Smith during this whole time period?
I believe it was just from Tammy's phone.
Did you save those?
Yes.
So you had a conversation with Elizabeth on December 27th that you recorded, and she told you she killed the baby. What did you do after this conversation?
After our conversation was over, hung up the phone. I said, I have to go. She goes, why? Are you going to go call the police now? And I pretty much just hung up on her. And my phone was dying, so I shut it off. And I went straight back. I turned around and went back because my dad was at my grandma's, and went back there and played the recording for him. And he said, this is finally enough evidence that you can have the police will start looking for them. They'll do something about it this time. So go to the Mesa Police Department, and they're right there. It was right across the street. So I went straight across the street to the Mesa Police Department, and I played the recording for them there at the front desk. And I asked to talk to an officer, and they said, where are you from? And I said, well, I live in Tempe. And they said, well, you have to go back to the Tempe Police Department, and you have to talk to them because you live in Tempe.
And did you go to the Tempe Police Department?
Yes.
Was your dad with you at that time?
Yes, my dad met me there.
And at the Tempe Police Department, did you talk to an Officer Snell?
Yes.
Did you tell Officer Snell everything that had happened up until this point?
I told him everything. I gave him the recorder. I turned back on my phone, and then when I turned back on my phone, I showed him the text message, and then I think maybe 4 or 5 other text messages popped up right after that Elizabeth had sent after I had turned my phone off. And he took pictures of them, and he wrote them down, and he took my recorder.
So you wrote down what was on the text messages?
Yes.
Did you take your phone?
My recorder. My phone, too, yes.
You took your recorder, he also took your phone?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may, although we're out of the time for afternoon break, so maybe now's a good time to take our afternoon break.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. Remember the admonition during that time, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes, and we'll see you then. And the door's going to open up in just a minute, and you can follow Kim out on that side.